Welcome to This Club Sucks, grief support for parents after the lasagnas are long gone. I am your host, Melissa Monroe, here with my co-host, Alexandria Seamock. Each week, we record our child loss chat on Twitter Spaces, where we explore topics around grief and trauma. Whether you are a bereaved parent, want to support bereaved parents, or exploring other sources of grief, we'll be here holding space after the lasagnas are long gone.
Oh, this club sucks.
Good morning, everyone.
Good afternoon over here. Hello.
Oh, good afternoon. Yes. Where are you, Graciela? I forgot.
I'm in Florida.
Oh, good afternoon to you. And I guess it's probably high noon for you, Dr. A.
Yep, high
Excellent.
noon. I just had to look again, even though I know what time it is. I had to remind myself.
Well, thank you both for being here. I really appreciate it. And Graciela, this is the first week in weeks and weeks and weeks I have not had to do a trial run because all of my guests seem to have never used Twitter Spaces before. So I'm breaking a lot of people into their first Twitter Space experience, but it's nice to have a pro on here.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate that. And that's wonderful that you're getting more and more people to experience it. There's been not rumors necessarily. I don't even know if we can call it a rumor, but some people have messaged me about Spaces going away now with Elon Musk owning it, and I'm like, I don't think so. Like, there's so many Spaces going on daily. Like, that doesn't make any sense for them to go away. So the more people we get on board, the better it will be.
I agree. I forget what the statistic is, but isn't it like 1 million a day worldwide?
Yeah, I don't know. Honestly, I've heard so many numbers and I don't pay attention to any of that. So let's just say it's a lot. And every time there's a glitch, I pretty much just know that it could be because of how many there are going on, right? Like technology is fickle.
Indeed. And I'm not the techiest girl in the bunch, that's for sure. But I have become so much more techie this year. I've learned more about tech in the last 6 months than the entire rest of my life combined. And most of it has been painless because I've learned so much on Twitter Spaces and from people like Rachel and yourself and Keith Keller. And so I'm really grateful to Spaces. I've learned a ton hanging out in some spaces. And good morning to you, Nana. I see Nana's in here. And Rachel, thank you for being here. I know we're expecting some more, but we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to Child Loss Chat. These are recorded for my podcast, This Club Sucks, grief support for parents after the lasagnas are long gone. Today, we're going to be talking about self-love and self-care during times of grief. And I'm so thrilled to have my friend Graciela on to help us explore this topic. Graciela, would you like to introduce yourself to everyone?
Sure. Thank you so much. So my name is Graciela Moore. I am from Puerto Rico, based in Florida. So I do speak Spanish. I am a toddler mom and a stepmother of mostly adults. All of my children have between 23 and 16 years of age, and there's 5 of them. I grieve a lot of things aside from people in my family, and have definitely maneuvered the process many a time. So I'm quite the advocate for people understanding that grief is not just about losing a loved one. We grieve, many things throughout our life, and acknowledging it is part of the process. And I think it helps in the healing process. And when it comes to my work, I am an ICF certified coach, and I focus on helping people understand hope as a mindset that has nothing to do with, religion or Christianity. And then I'm very focused on highly sensitive people and empaths because that's just who I am. And so helping those people navigate the reality of their experience has been a blessing. So that's what I do.
That's wonderful. And I'd love to have another space with you sometime to talk about highly sensitive people. There's a book, I think it's called Highly Sensitive People or something like that. I'm sure you know which book I'm talking about. It's at least 20 years old, at
Yeah.
least, maybe more. And I remember I got that book right when it came out, and it has like a 30-question quiz, I think. And I took the quiz, and I had, I don't know, 28 of the 30 things, which blew my mind because some of them didn't seem related to being sensitive or empathic. Like the crowds one, I remember thinking, oh, that's why. Um, and I, yeah, that book and understanding that part of myself made a lot of sense. And I'm sure, like many of your clients, were never really taught that that was a blessing. It was more a pain in everyone else's ass. So it took some undoing and some mental mindset changes, uh, which is much easier to do when you're an adult and out on your own. But it's really important work, and I'm glad that you're doing it because I think a lot of HSP folks are greatly misunderstood. And then, of course, times like losing a child or any other big times of grief are going to you're going to feel them more or more intensely, or those feelings are going to be more available. Um, I do believe everyone has the feelings, especially in child loss. I'm talking about child loss. Everyone has the feelings, but I think for a highly sensitive person, they might be more on the top, more available, more visible, and that can be uncomfortable for some folks around you. So, I know I personally had to just be really picky about the company I kept and really protect the space around me. Have you found that with any of your clients, Graciela?
Oh, absolutely. It is definitely a way of living that differs from non-highly sensitive people. And just for the benefit of those listening, so the book and the term highly sensitive person was coined by Elaine Aron in 1991. She's the one that wrote the book Highly Sensitive Person and Highly Sensitive Child. And yeah, this is part of my work is bringing awareness to the fact that being a highly sensitive person has nothing to do with feelings, but it has to do with your senses. That's the emphasis on the word sensitive. It has to do with all five senses, and of course that energetic input and how we process just
Sensory information?
sensory input, exactly. So it's been very interesting, and we should definitely do a space about it. 20 to 30% of the population is highly sensitive, and there's just not enough out there to help. For example, if you're a teacher and you have a classroom of 25 kids, which was my experience in the fourth grade as a teacher, I was a fourth grade teacher once, and there were 25 children there, at least 3 or 4 of them may be highly sensitive. So how they're expressing themselves and how they may be struggling in your classroom may have nothing to do with a neurodivergence so much as it could just be that they're highly sensitive children. And so there's just not enough awareness out there for this to be even a topic of conversation. We just narrow it down to, oh, you're too much, too loud, too sensitive in terms of too touchy-feely. Where in reality, we should just be teaching our children how to process that sensory input and how to make sense of it so that then when there's that level of awareness, then there's a level of control. And so, yeah, I love working with this context because yeah, my child is definitely a highly sensitive child. And then empath is a kind of a different thing. But they get amalgamated often for good reason, but yeah, they're both different. So, yeah, there's definitely a lot there that we could dive in for a whole day.
Well, I would look forward to that. And I'm both. And I was an adult before I figured out, oh, there's a name for this. There's a reason why, even as a kid, I didn't want to be in a crowded room. And part of me when COVID first started, I was like, woohoo! I don't have to come up with excuses for why I can't do all of these school functions because I will lose my mind if I have to go to all these school functions. So, yes, one day we will have a big space on that. But today I want to keep it for my listeners really focused on how all of us can take care of ourselves during grief. And I would also like to talk about how more empathic and more highly sensitive folks can take care of themselves during grief. Because in my experience, personally, and with my patients, I think empathic and highly sensitive people both in some ways have an easier time with grief. I mean, look, no one's going to say, you can have bonbons on the beach or grief, which, I mean, no one's going to choose grief out of those two things. But when it comes up, which it does for all of us in many different forms, and some, like losing a child, are more challenging than others. But it's going to happen. And I think when it does, again, this is just my experience with myself and with my patients, it seems like folks who are maybe highly sensitive or empathic have an easier time themselves processing the intensity of the grief, but it can be challenging for the people around them who inevitably say the wrong things, and then the grieving person feels shamed, and then they feel like they have to hide it, which then really makes you, if you're trying to hide the grief, I think you're less likely to engage in self love and self care. Would you agree, Graciela?
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I think, when there's other people involved and other people's expectations or other people's opinions, it can be a little bit harder to maneuver, whether for highly sensitive people or not. I think grief is just very 100% singular. So the way I grieve may look completely different than the way you grieve. And if you look, for example, at the thread that you shared and all of those articles that talk about examples of how to apply self care during grieving, if you think about it, all of those are examples that you should be applying for self care, whether you're grieving or not, right? So, like,
Yep.
right. So, I think the key is to give yourself the space and the respect. So respect is huge when it comes to other people because they have their opinions about how we should be grieving. And I'm a big advocate for like putting my foot down and letting, people making people understand that the way they grieve is different than mine. Like, I was at my dad's funeral and being blamed for not crying enough. What? I mean, maybe I just don't need to cry right now. Like, mind your own business and your own tears, right? Like, people tend to, like you said, say the wrong thing or approach the way that we should be doing things with a completely subjective lens, when in reality, everybody should just be worried about their own business, right? And this just applies to everything. And so I think the key when we are grieving something or someone is to really push ourselves to do these things because we're not going to feel like doing them. And this also applies to, symptoms of depression. And I think the biggest misconception, or one of the biggest misconceptions in our life, is that we think that motivation leads to action, and that's the case sometimes. We're so motivated to do something that we go ahead and we do it. But sometimes when it comes to depression and grief, and when we are really low on that energy level, it's the other way around. It's action that leads to motivation. So, in my experience, I have found that when I don't feel like doing something, because I'm low energy, because I'm depressed or mood or in a mood or grieving something or someone or missing someone, I need to push myself to do those things like taking a shower, doing my work, going to the park, going outside, doing my meditation. Like, I don't want to do any of it. Of course, I want to stay in bed. Who doesn't? right? Especially when you're feeling your lowest, you may have no energy. But when I push myself to take those actions, then I get motivated, right? Because that energy starts flowing through me from one thing to the next. And all of a sudden, I've accomplished a lot. And there has to be a level of awareness for you to make those decisions. And of course, it's all a choice. You don't make a decision without choosing to make it, right? And then once you make the choice and you do the thing, the hardest part I feel like for a lot of us is to be in that level of awareness that says, oh, kudos to me, I did it, right? And activating that reward system in the brain, which now we're talking about neuroscience, and how activating that reward system says, well, now I know I'm going to feel better when I do something else, right? Because my brain is doing its thing and I feel it. And I think talking like in this kind of language, like, oh, my brain doing this and me feeling it, that's so empath. Because a person that is non-highly sensitive just does the thing and never put this kind of rationale behind it. So that's part of the reason why I love this work so much. And it's because I get to see all of those aspects, and there's that sensitivity to being able to see all of the pieces of the puzzle, whereas somebody like my husband, for example, who is neurodivergent, he has ADD, but he is a non-highly sensitive person who simply just practices empathy, right? um he just does his work, and it's like, great, now on to the next thing, right? Like, he just doesn't see it as deeply as I see it. So that's part of the fun, I feel like, for my life and for my work. But it's a day-to-day choice when we are grieving, and I think understanding when we are in it and respecting the process. I'll give you an example. So last Mother's Day, Mother's Day for me is very awkward. First of all, my child is still very young, so he doesn't acknowledge the holiday, right? He's only 3. And then my stepchildren is very awkward for them because their mother is not here and they don't have a good relationship with their mother. And the fact that they have a stepmother, it's just always been super awkward. So already, like, I kind of like dread the day, right? And then I don't have a good relationship with my mother, so there's that. And then my husband's mother is gone, right? So not last year, last Mother's Day, so earlier this year, during my son's nap, which is normally at this time, he's right there taking a nap right now. I decided to just take a nap. Like, I didn't want to do anything else, right? Like, I wasn't feeling it. I hadn't spoken to my mother or my grandmother. I just wasn't feeling it, just like I had anticipated. I was dreading the whole day. And my husband comes into the room and he's like asking me all these questions, like, what's wrong? And you didn't like your gift, and what's the matter? And blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, I just need to get through the day, and understanding that we are in it is huge, because then you just do the thing, whatever it takes to get through it. Because I feel like the grieving never ends, honestly, right? Like, it comes, Ruth L. Snyder said it so beautifully yesterday in her space. She was talking about the child that she lost. So you might want to talk to her as well. And how she sees grief as kind of like waves in the ocean, and they just come and go and come and go. And I feel like it's absolutely true, because some days I don't even think about my dad, even though his picture is like staring at me in the face right now as I'm sitting on my desk. And I converted his pin as a bracelet. So I wear the bracelet every single day, never take it off. So he's very present. But some days I don't necessarily miss him. And then all of a sudden, something will happen, or a memory will flow, and there's that wave again, right? And so I think awareness is key. and then pushing ourselves to just get through it instead of just sitting in it is huge. But if you think about it, this doesn't just apply to grief, it just applies to low energy in general, right? Like, we don't want to fester in that low energy. We want to do whatever it takes, honor the person however you can honor them, and move on with your day so that then you can be motivated. Oh, I feel like that was a lot.
No, it was great. Thank you so much, Graciela. Um, yeah, and when you were talking about that, it made me realize that for me, and I think I'm not alone here. For me, when a grief wave comes, and that it is indeed waves, uh, sometimes it doesn't come from anything identifiable. It really just does come up behind you, hit you over the head, and says, "Today you're mine." So sometimes for me, it's never a thought that brings it up. It's never, oh, there's her shoe, and then that's not how it happens for me. Almost never how it happens for me. For me, it kind of comes, it's a feeling first. It never starts with a thought. And so then I think for some people that are like me, and I think many are, where it starts as a feeling, it's not necessarily like, oh, you know, it, that color shirt reminds me of her. It's not always that. So when it starts as a feeling, it can be difficult for folks to get to to think their way out of it, right? So, it starts as a feeling, you realize grief has taken you, you had a day planned. um, and the day is going to have to be different now because you're going to have to take care of yourself a little bit more. And ideally, you're right. Ideally, we are all doing all of these things on this list regularly anyway. But it's really difficult in today's society unless, you know, you you have, I'm trying to think of the right word. Um, Most people do not have the luxury of regular self-care. There are people taking a bus 2 hours to and from work, working two jobs, no insurance or very bad insurance, spending hours of dealing with paperwork for just the bureaucracy of being alive. And so doing basic self-care on a regular basis is challenging for a lot of people in lower incomes and, uh, you know, in certain communities. So it's even more difficult in times of grief because it's a feeling, and to make these decisions to engage in self-care requires, as you say, a thought. And it can be really difficult to come out of that overwhelming feeling that you maybe didn't know was coming and get into a thought process that's going to break you out. And so this is where practice really does make perfect, in my opinion. When my daughter died, and it was unexpected, and I found her, and I had PTSD, and we obviously had no idea she was going to die. We still don't know why she died. It became clear to me that I had to do something for myself. I thought, what I can do is what I tell all of my patients to do. Do something for you every day for 1 hour, whether that's therapy, whether that's taking a bath, whether that's reading a book in the bath, whether that's going out in the backyard and reading a book, whether it's getting a massage, whether it's taking a walk, whatever it is, it was for me. And I was very, very, very strict about that for years. And a couple of years ago when COVID started, and I just couldn't because life was so crazy and my kid was home from school and struggling, and I didn't know whether I could work or not. And there just wasn't time for me and there was no space. So I want to acknowledge that finding the time can be difficult. So I really like to at least take some of the cost problems away from people and discuss with you some free ways people can engage in self-care and self-love that don't cost any money and maybe aren't a huge expenditure of time. Do you have some ideas for us, Graciela?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, and they're also in the articles that you shared as well. I'm so glad that Unforgiven Warrior has shared it as well. So thank you for that. Um, Things that don't cost us anything. So sharing about the way that we feel with someone that we love and trust. And I feel like emphasis should be on trust because you obviously don't want to open up to someone that will like kind of backlash or disrespect, right? Like that's not very nice and it'll just make it worse, right? So emphasis on someone that you trust will hold the space for you to be able to talk about it, right? And sometimes it's very sad that we don't have someone, right? And I think social audio has provided a lot of that for us. But at the same time, we're talking about things that are free, and you do need a phone to engage in social audio. So someone in your life writing about it. I'm a huge journaler, so I journal every day, twice a day. And at this point in my life, it's so second nature that I don't know where I would be if I wasn't journaling, right? Like it's like I don't know what life is without it. And sometimes if I don't have a pen and paper, I grab my phone and I just let it out on a voice note that I may delete or I may go back to it. And sometimes I listen to it back and it's like, whoa, what was I thinking that day that all of that came out? That's interesting. Kind of the same way that you go back on your journal, it's like, wow, that was very profound. I can't believe I wrote that. So writing about it, you mentioned how difficult personal hygiene can be for some of the members of the community, and I absolutely agree. Spending time in nature is not just huge for empaths, but I think it's very healing when we are, in those moments of grief and feeling very low to go outside and just feel the breeze. Even if I don't feel like doing it, every time I do it, I feel better afterwards. So there's that action leads to motivation, right? Instead of the other way around. Like, oh, I would rather stay inside. But something just pushes me to go out to breathe the fresh air. And I always feel, refreshed, right? Which is also very empath of me, I guess. And we don't acknowledge those free blessings that we have, right? Like it doesn't cost us anything to go outside and breathe, purposefully take a few deep breaths, right? It's extremely healing. Let's see what else. There's just so much that we can do that doesn't necessarily cost anything. Listening to music is one of the huge ones, I think, for me. And it can also be very triggering because my dad was a musician. So, for example, if I am grieving my dad in a specific moment, I'm not going to listen to the type of music that he used to play, right? Or I may not necessarily want to play some of the music that we would listen to together because that will just reinforce that, that grieving just energy, right? So I may want to just play some Brain FM or listen to instrumental music is very recommended for highly sensitive people because lyrics can be so triggering, right? And so um, you may want to strategize in that way. Like, what kind of music are you going to listen to so that you don't get sadder, right? Does that make sense? Walking always gets me going as well. And like you said, your podcast, right? You mentioned the podcast, The Worst Club. Is that it? I think that's genius.
This
Uh,
club sucks.
Hugs. I love that. So finding support, that's huge. Finding someone that can understand and joining that support group, I think that's a huge one. And sometimes I don't know if we like to pretend or if we just pretend kind of like unknowingly, but none of us are going through things alone. It just feels like that. And I feel like it feels like that when the people in our experience are not supportive and then they ostracize you in your feeling and then you feel like you're all alone, which I actually think is very common for highly sensitive children who are misunderstood, right? I was the only highly sensitive child in my family. The other empath was my father, and he was way older and probably died not even knowing that he was empath, right? He just did his best and struggled and coped, right? That's the word in past tense. I'm sorry. I do that sometimes. He learned to cope with the way that he felt, with alcohol, which doesn't apply to me because I've been sober since he passed away, right? So I was always ostracized and I was always the odd one out. So when you are purposefully the odd one out, you obviously feel like you're all alone in the world. So finding someone who's going through the same thing, which I think social media has also provided that for a lot of us, is so good. And it feels so good to know that there's other people going through the same thing and that you can turn to each other, right? It's like, I'm not having a good day today. I need you to be there for me. And then when you are not having a good day, you can reach out and I'll be there for you. And I think social media has been a miracle in that sense, at least for me, finding other empaths, finding other highly sensitive people, and of course, finding people who are grieving their parents or who are going no contact with relationships that they also need to grieve, or who are undergoing faith crises that they need to maneuver and grief as well. This takes me back to the beginning where I was mentioning that we grieve a lot of things, not just, the loss of a loved one.
Absolutely. We're doing an episode soon on crises of faith during times of grief. And yes, it's absolutely true that we grieve. We grieve jobs, we grieve ends of relationships. Today, though, because we only have an hour, I want to keep it pretty focused on the loss of someone close to us, particularly in this group, children. Something you were saying, and now I couldn't write fast enough, reminded me that, support. You were talking about support and having people that understand what you're going through. I just want to point out that sometimes that support doesn't come from the obvious places. And in the right after I lost my daughter, I had no desire to talk to any other bereaved parents. Not because I don't care, but because I care too much, probably. But I didn't want anyone. I didn't want anyone to understand what that felt like. It broke my heart that anyone would ever know that pain, and I couldn't handle knowing any more people that felt that pain in the very beginning. And so sometimes the people who quote get it don't necessarily have the exact same path or the exact same loss. There are some people that just can get it. And I will also say that a lot of my greatest support came from people that never had children. And the only people, ironically, the only people that quote unquote said dumb things to me were all parents, all of them. Anyone that expected me to be better, quote unquote better, 10 days later, every single one of them was a parent. And that blew my mind at the time. I thought, do you honestly think you would be, quote, better 10 days after your child died? Point to one of your kids and tell me which one you think you'd be like bopping through life just fine if that one died. It blew my mind. So I think it's really important for us all to realize before we're in a period of grief that who our strongest supporters are might not be who you're expecting. And that's okay. I made a decision early on that I had to just keep walking toward the love. Just keep walking toward the love. Do I feel love from that place, from that person, from that thing, from that activity? Yes. So I walked that way. And if you're walking toward the love all of the time, the not love, the judgments, all of that's behind you. You don't see it. It's not registering in your body. You're just because you're cruising on toward the love. And that was my, I think, strongest act of self-care was I'm just going to keep marching toward I'm not going to stay here and fight with this person because they just told me I should be, quote, better 10 days after my child died unexpectedly. They don't know. They probably don't even mean harm. I know they didn't mean harm. They just don't know what to say. And that's really society's fault. We have a completely grief illiterate society, which is why I'm doing these shows. But for those of us grieving, I've seen a lot of people really tank relationships and sources of that could have been supportive because it's not who or it's not who they thought it would be or what they thought it would look like. And so it's really, I think, important to know that maybe your strongest sense of support will, if you've lost a child, will not be someone else that lost a child. It might be your neighbor who you barely knew, which is one of the things that happened to me. Some of the people who were the most helpful, I knew peripherally, but man, were they there when that happened. And I don't know why, but I didn't question it because I just kept walking toward the love. So I just wanted to add that really quickly. And Mr. JB, you have a question or a comment?
I apologize ahead of time for doing 12 things at once. I didn't hear who was talking about journaling, but I wanted to circle back to the journaling comment.
Graciela.
And Graciela, okay. I'm an anomaly when it comes to this community of grieving loss because I'm a man who apparently doesn't mind talking about grieving and loss. And there doesn't appear to be a lot of us out here who want to, and when I say us, I mean men, who want to acknowledge that we grieve and we are looked upon as these strong testosterone-filled humans who cannot grieve. But I'm not going to go back into what my grief is about because, I mean, most people here know what I lost, what I had taken from me rather 22 years ago. And I just wanted to hit on the fact that journaling is what prevented me from losing my mind and going to a dark place where I could not come back from. And I don't know, I don't even remember how I got to journal, but I started journaling 22 years ago. I stopped doing it 2 years ago because I found that I had reached the place I was trying to get to. But journaling is a very important part of my self-care. And it was the only thing that was available to me because being a man, quote unquote, sitting in front of a therapist and telling this therapist who I knew nothing about and who didn't know me all about my thoughts and desires and secrets was something that didn't appeal to me. Sitting in a circle of strangers, spilling my guts didn't appeal to me. Journaling was personal, and I was able to do it because only me, myself, and I knew what I wrote in those journals. And I never went back and read any of the 26,000 journals I wrote in that time frame. I've never gone back and read any of them. They helped me at that moment when I was writing. So journaling for some people may be different. I mean, I'm sure my way of doing it was entirely different because I had conversations with my wife and son in my journals. I talked to them about everything I did on a daily basis. At some point, it just became me relating my thoughts. So journaling saved my life, and I just wanted to relate that.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Mr. JB. I really appreciate your story and your willingness to share it and your openness here on this space week after week. Journaling, I blogged, I guess, more. And the reason I blogged rather than journal, although I blogged like it was a journal, was no one knew why my daughter died. All these 11 years later, we still don't know why she died. She went to sleep and never woke up 11 days after her second birthday. She was pronounced dead as I was standing under her birthday banner, which was a very bizarre moment. But I had so many people coming to me, and in their eyes, I could just feel that they wanted to ask, but they didn't know if they should ask, and they didn't know what to do. And I didn't have the wherewithal to hold their hand through my own tragedy. I mean, I was barely standing. I was functioning, though. For some reason, I remained fully functional in a crisis. I don't Betty Davis out until later, but I was functioning, but I didn't have the wherewithal to hold someone else's hand through my own tragedy. And I could not talk. Like I literally could not talk. It was exhausting to me. And so I thought, oh, I'll just write down what we know and then they can read it if they want to read it. And I won't have to be re-traumatized in the telling of it. Since then, I've learned that retelling without some sort of somatic engagement is indeed re-traumatizing. And somehow I'm so glad that I recognized that in myself. I didn't have the science. I didn't have any fancy explanation. I just knew that it was traumatizing to me to retell it. So I wrote, and I got a lot of amazing feedback and a lot of amazing support through sharing that work. And so I just kept doing it. Now I have a book coming out in a couple of months, and I hope to help a lot of other people who have gone through it. But yes, writing, journaling, blogging, making up a whole different story, whatever it is free and available to anyone. And every psychologist I've talked to has said that building a narrative around the event that is causing grief or the traumatic event creating a narrative around that is one of the most important pieces of healing. And writing absolutely does that for you. And you can share it like I did, or you can never even read it yourself like Mr. JB did. It doesn't matter. What matters is that you are processing out loud, and the act of committing it from your brain to a page or a typewriter or a computer gets it out of you a little bit. And sometimes that's all you needed. Like for Mr. JB, he just needed it out of him. I needed it out of me and also to be shared because I couldn't handle the questions. So it was solving two problems for me. And Graciela, before we take any other questions or comments from the audience, I wondered if you had anything to add about journaling and the healing power of committing things to print.
Well, I think it all has to do with expressing it instead of repressing it, and that's the magic of it. Like we are not just leaving it all inside and rethinking it and re-going through it and over and over again. The act of just letting it out and expressing it no matter how, right? So that's why a support group may help for some people because they're not into journaling, so they would rather speak about it. And there's that community for people who value community, then the support group might be really good, right? But then for others, it's like, no, I would rather just do this by myself, which is 100% valid, right? And I love Mr. JB's story. I've read his blog many times, and it's just so beautiful how he just verbalized his whole experience. And then I find it fascinating that you haven't looked through your journals, but of course, that's your personal choice, right? And I absolutely respect it. But that to me that proves it right there. It's like it's not even about going back to read what he wrote. The act that he let it out and expressed it was healing for him enough, right? So I think that's really what it's all about, communicating it instead of just pushing it down and swallowing it. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's really important. Otherwise, it swims. Like I'm a list maker. I can't talk either, apparently, today. I live by my lists. And I do have days where I find myself not going to my list. And those are days that I'm either creative, it's not planned out, but I'll just find like, oh, I got a lot done today and I didn't look at my list. But mostly I live by my list. And it's because for me, instead of those things, oh, I have to clean the oven. Oh, I have to pick up the bit. Oh, I have to call that person back. Oh, I have to call that insurance company again. Oh, I have to, if that's all swimming around my brain, every time it does another lap in my brain, it feels like another thing that I haven't done, even though it's the same thing swimming a bunch of laps in my head. And for me, writing that down gets it out of the infinity pool in my mind, and I can think more clearly. And I think journaling is similar. It gets it out of the infinity pool of your mind or the washing machine where it's just going around and around and around and around. And every time it circles, it feels to your body like a new thing, like another thing you have to do, like another thing you have to process, when it's not. It's the same thing. And I think just the act of putting it down on paper, whether it's making a list of things to do or processing emotions, gets it out of that washing machine mentality. Do you know what I mean?
Yes, I agree 100%. And it's very different for everyone. So I think understanding how we manage. So I think this takes me back to emotional intelligence, right? And I think if there's a lack of emotional intelligence, this may be why a lot of us may struggle with some of these things or maneuvering these things. It's like I feel a certain way and I don't even know why, and I can't put my finger on it, so on and so forth. But it brings me back to that level of awareness. Once you're aware, then you get to make a choice, and that can make all the difference. I see Donika has her hand up. Hi, Donika.
Hi, nice to see you here. And I'm on my lunch break, so I just wanted to say a few things. And I have heard JB's story is beautiful, but so is every other story in this platform, because we all go through stuff. So to me, death have struck so many times, and loss. The pain and the people then leave after we lose the loved ones is excruciating, because you have to live every day and love the same, even more, the people then left us. Even if the time was right or wasn't right, they always live with us and go and be celebrated with us. So you have to have an exit plan, because it will be their birthday, the day of passing. Something can trigger you. So like we have a self-care plan. You have to have self-grieving plan. When I lost many people, but my brother's was October 2nd, and was my nephew's birthday. He turned 16, and it was my brother-in-law birthday, Bobby's husband, and so was my wedding day in 1 month. So there are emotions, but how we deal with that, the memories that are going to trigger. So for everything, then you have death, pain. It is very painful. Any memory that we can't celebrate anymore because they are not in physical, or any memory that is in your subconscious and it triggers you, we have to have a plan in our mind, in our heart, or physically written. It doesn't matter if it's journal, it's a note to remind yourself, like, hey, today I'm going to allow myself to feel sad and to feel like crap, but this is the only day. And tomorrow is going to be a day that I need to breathe, and after tomorrow to eat something to strengthen me. So if you separate these goals, spread it thin, and don't overwhelm yourself, so you can do it. I'm going to drink water and I'm going to rest. I'm going for a walk 10 minutes and I'm going to rest. Because through the process of loss and grieving, you don't want to do anything. Who is thinking about goals? Who is thinking about following through? If I can open my eyes and stop crying, that is going to be the best I can do. So it doesn't matter the people that left us and they are, into the light. They always are with us. This is how you find the healing. You are here with me. I breathe with you, think with you, create with you, but I don't see, and I miss the touch, the smell, seeing you. But you are with me, and I'm going to celebrate you. So write small things through the grieving process. Remember them, and don't push yourself. Give yourself enough time. It doesn't matter, a year, week, a month, 10 years, 20 years, until you feel it. Then I'm ready to go help somebody. Only when you overspill with healing, you can give to others. We say with love, but healing is a long process. So this is what I want to say. Take care of yourself, love yourself, and erase some memories that trigger you, and keep the good one, then you always inspire you and you can share with others. Thank you.
Oh, thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate that. And I'm so sorry to hear about your brother and the children that he leaves behind. And it's so recent. And so my heart goes out to you and your family. I think what Danica alluded to is really important, having a plan. I think especially in the early days, I had to have a plan in the early days. I'm a little further along. My daughter died 11 years ago. It was the last like 2 or 3 years, excuse me. It was the last 2 or 3 years where I felt like I don't, I don't know if I need a plan, but I need to know what my tools are. I need to look in my toolbox and see what's there and be ready for how I feel. In the first years, I absolutely needed a plan. I did a huge fundraiser memorial concert on around her birthday and her death day are only 11 days apart. I knew that that was going to be a challenging 11-day period every year. And when it that first year, about 5 months after she died, when I realized that that period was probably going to be gnarly, I thought I need something to pour myself into in her memory, in her honor, that will help other people that I will never meet in order to get through that. And so that's what I did for many years. And then COVID hit, and I was a little bummed that like I wasn't going to be able to do that thing, but I wasn't going to be able to do it. It just, I could not throw a big concert in the middle of COVID. And what I found was I don't think a concert would have been the best thing for me to do during that period that year anyway. I was in a different place, and what I really needed that year was more solitude. I needed that day to be quieter and access some of the other tools in my tool belt. So, yes, having a plan is great. But when you make your plan, I also encourage you to look in your tool belt at all of the things that exist in your tool belt. Because when the day comes, sometimes you don't feel the way you think you might. For me, and I know many other bereaved parents and people who are grieving, you think it's the birthday or the death day or whatever the day is that's going to be tricky. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes the day that takes you down is a week before it or 4 days after. It's not that predictable. And so having a plan and also knowing what tools you have available to you, knowing who you can call, knowing for people who like support groups, knowing what support groups are there, and kind of having a loose idea of what might be available in case you don't feel the way you're anticipating that you would feel. Which brings me to one more thing before we open it back up to questions. Those dates are obviously tricky. But as I've noticed, and I know many, many other bereaved parents and grieving people have noticed, it's not always that day that takes you down. And I find that the people, my friends who really spend a lot of time dreading those days, kind of create what they fear. And there's no way that period isn't going to get you, because even if you can mentally handle that, your nervous system remembers. Your body knows. Your body knows what happened that day 5 years ago or 11 years ago or 22 years ago. However, your body knows. So there's going to be something. But if we spend that time in dread, we are certainly going to have a bad experience. So it just brings me back to walking toward that love. Walk toward what feels good. I'm going to take a walk. I need the air. I need the trees. This weekend, my surviving daughter has had a major health crisis this year, and it has been really overwhelming. I knew I needed to go to the mountains or the trees, or I was like, I'm going to drive off the cliff like Thelma and Louise, or I'm going to the mountains. So I guess I'm going to the mountains. I need some air. I need my trees. I need to reset. And so I did that for myself. And I'm fortunate that I was able to do that. I'm fortunate I knew where to go. I'm fortunate that I knew what kind of setting was going to be healing to me, and that I was able to find the space and resources to do that. So it's all a long way of saying, keep walking towards the love, keep walking towards, does it feel good to sit in this blue chair and read a book? Does it feel good to sit in the grass and rub my toes across it? Whatever it is, keep marching towards that, and assess your tool belt at all times, because we don't always feel the way that we think we might. Sometimes it's different. Does anyone have any comments or questions, or want to share some aspect of their self-care, and or how they manage to remain in a state of self-love during times of grief? Kimberly, thank you for being here.
Hi. Oh, man, my heart is on fire. I really just came up earlier to, first, I just want to say thank you to everyone. I really needed to hear everything that was said today. And I really came up because the divine pull of this space during the time of what I've been going through this last week was just like, oh, wow. Like, this was a kind of a shock. So I had my 4th miscarriage last week, and I hadn't really felt like I was comfortable talking to anyone. Sorry, I'm not sure why I got this emotional. I haven't really been crying. I've been more in like this depressive state lately, and I was actually in a political room earlier that I was chatting in, so I was feeling a little bit more solid. When I came into this chat, I saw the child loss chat, and so I've had 3 miscarriages and 1 stillbirth. It hit me today that I always say 4 miscarriages because I don't ever want to talk about the stillbirth, because that is the most painful one, right? And so I actually hadn't spoken to my mother about what had happened because my mom lost my sister just a couple of years ago. And so I didn't want to be a burden to her. I didn't think when I did my space yesterday that my mom would be listening. And in passing, I said, I've been dealing with this miscarriage, blah, blah, blah. And I kind of just skimmed over it. And it hurt my mom so much that she had to find out in a Twitter space. So the first thing I'd like to say is some of the people that we don't think can handle holding space for us are the exact people that want and need to hold space for us, because their healing comes through our sharing. Their healing comes through holding space for us and helping us heal. So the 3-hour conversation that I had with my mom about the loss of my sister and the loss of my pregnancies, because I get a lot of people who tell me that I don't have the right to talk about it because I have 2 kids. It was just a really big learning lesson to come in and hear you guys talking about this in a way that was just so honoring of your experiences. And thank you, Graciela, for the words you said when I came in, because it allowed me to settle down. I wasn't prepared for the hashtag. When I jumped in, I just saw grief. I didn't see the child loss chat, and I thought, wow, what a divine moment. So I just wanted to share that part that, sometimes we can hurt the people that really want to be there for us, because it hurt my mom a lot to know that I'd been dealing with this all week and I wasn't ready to tell her because I thought it would hurt her. After that 3-hour conversation, she said, I feel like parts of myself have been healed, with losing my sister. So that's the one point I wanted to bring up, is just a thank you, and just wanted to honor the divineness that brought me into this space, because I don't usually get to be on during this time because I have clients during this exact moment, these times. So the fact that I took off work this week allowed me to see more runes and to listen. So that was the first thing. And then the second part was the idea of journaling. I met Graciela through journaling on Wisdom or here somewhere, and we connected on that. Donik and I as well. Believe Rachel too. I'm not sure fully. Everything blurs together these days. I'm in this depression for 2 hours, and then I'm normal, and then I'm hormonal depression, postpartum. So it's all kind of a wild kind of experience. So forgive me if I forget who's where. And Melissa, your strength to speak so clearly about your daughter's experience, and your experience has just been very motivating. But one of the things I wanted to talk about with journaling, and my thing here, as I was wanting to just be a listener today, was my first course that I ever taught was on healing through journaling. And it was after the loss of my the stillborn, my child. And I was making products for scrapbook companies, and I was on TV for scrapbooking, and I was doing art journaling at the time, and that was in 2006 to 2008, so roughly 14, 15 years ago. But I remember I had taught this course, and there were 3 ways of journaling that I allowed people to have. And I think that's why it was so popular back then. I didn't tell people that they had to read their journal. Like Mr. JB said, I was so happy to hear that he has his own way of doing that. And then there's 2 other ways. So I have 3 types of journals, if it might help anyone. I don't know. This is being recorded, so maybe. I have 3 types of journals, and the one that I've been using as of lately in my journaling this last week through the miscarriage and the postpartum is the one that I burn pages out of. So I have one journal that's about documentation, and I read that to see patterns of my life and to look back on nostalgia and see what my kids are doing and see what I've made it through. So there's that journal. And I have a set of those journals. Everybody knows that you can read those. And then everybody knows that there's another set of journals that you don't touch. That's mama's journals that is there for you to read later in life, but I don't want my kids reading it right now. I don't want to read it because of that re-traumatizing that I learned through therapy. So that journal is there. I write it. I don't touch it. It's like Mr. JB. The third one is where I journal and then I rip the pages out and I burn them and I watch all of that pain just sort of like dissipate. I have not been able to use the other 2 journals this week. I've only been able to use the one that I burn. I cannot journal any happy memory. So I just wanted to show up and say that while we show up to the world one way, it's very okay to show up not okay. And sometimes you need people that you don't even know very well, or that may not know you very well, or people that may not even like you, but still are willing to be there for you, right? So I just wanted to say that I'm a testament to how these rooms can change people and how these rooms can heal people. And I just wanted to say thank you for everybody who shared, because of everything that's happened this week, the call with my mama and this space was exactly what I needed to try to, do what Donika said, which is allow yourself that time to grieve and then say, but tomorrow I want to get up and move on, not move on, but move through. So thank you for allowing me to share. And I apologize for the crying, but it's just how I had to show up today. And I appreciate everyone else here.
Oh, my heart, Kimberly. I'm so sorry to hear about your miscarriage. I have non-Buddhist thoughts about the people that tell you not that you don't have a right to grieve, though. I'm just going to be real honest. I like super non-Buddhist thoughts about what I want to say to those folks. But I'm going to let the Buddhist part of me win and not say them, and just let you know that I had that thought. This is Child Loss Chat. I'm just going to make a blanket statement. No one ever has to apologize for tears up in this room, whether you lost a child or not. I know we have many listeners who have not lost children, but get something else out of the space, or they just want to learn how to be better supporters, and they're all welcome. But no one ever has to apologize for crying in this room. I cry half the weeks at least. I'm so sorry that was your experience. I'm more sorry that anyone would feel like they had the right to belittle your experience. That really deeply upsets me. And I'm so glad you had that talk with your mother. And I think it brings up a really important point, which I touched on earlier, which is we don't really know where our greatest support is going to come from. We don't really know. And I've watched people tank relationships because they think, well, this person had this place in my life and they weren't there in exactly the way that I needed them to be at that moment. And while I get that, I totally get it. It's also, we don't even know what we need moment to moment. I don't know what I need moment to moment. Sometimes I have like a sense of it, but I can't, especially if you're in trauma brain, you can't verbalize it or articulate it that well. And so again, march toward the love, march toward the love, march toward the love. It might not be who or what you were expecting. And if you But if you focus on that, if you focus where you're finding the healing, if you're focused on where you're finding the love and the support and something that feels good at a time where most things feel shitty, then the other stuff won't phase you. And you might not have to tank a relationship that you've had for a friendship that you've had for 30 years because they didn't do a thing that you thought that they should do when maybe you didn't even know what you needed. And look, also, some relationships deserve to end. There are, obviously there can be huge violations of trust or loyalty, and that's a different story. But I'm just talking about support might not come from whom, where, what you expect. And you're so open in a time of grief anyway. And my advice, which I rarely give to anyone grieving, is to let that openness work for you by being open to support coming from where you might not expect it. And again, Kimberly, it really means a lot to me that you shared that. I'm really, really deeply sorry. We have an episode on miscarriage and stillbirth, which I'll send to your DMs afterwards. I think Donica had her hand up.
Yes, I felt every word Kimberly was talking. I'm so sorry. I didn't even know anything. And I feel bad that I didn't know anything to reach out to you early. But know that I'm here for you and call anytime you want. And I'll listen to you. I'll wipe your tears in the distance. And, it is your pain. It is your time to deal with that, but know that we all are souls and we can lift you up and we feel your pain. So I send you love and healing, and please don't hesitate to ask for help and support. I'm your number one. Whenever come across, I'm going to give it back to you. I love you.
Thank you for that, Donik. And I just want to let everybody know, or Donik especially, I hadn't made it public. I hadn't spoken of it because of the people who I don't want to get into attacked negativity, just express their feelings of me not, I shouldn't be speaking about a trauma because I had the 2 kids and that caused issues. This has been going on for me for 5 years. So this is like a rooted issue of trauma on top of trauma. So I didn't feel like I wanted to maybe bring it here to Twitter because I wasn't sure how it would be received. But when I opened this room today, I was like, oh man, I did say it in one of my group DMs because I needed people to know what I was doing. But other than that, I really think everyone's perspective on this because, there's so many layers of grief. Because, and I'll end here because I know this is about Graciela's show today, but I think that one of the things that this has taught me is we can work so much on trauma healing. And I see so many faces here that talk about this so often, as this is your platform to talk about trauma. Rachel, Graciela, Donica, I see Kelly here, and Dr. Alexandria and Melissa. I see you all talk about trauma healing so much on this platform. And I do that on my other platforms, but this unlocked a whole nother level of having to heal from trauma because every time this happens, it just opens up the last 3. And then it opens up my sister's passing, and it opens up, my best friend's passing in a childcare situation. So it's these levels of trauma that we don't even realize are there, and it unlocks that. And we become versions of ourselves that we don't recognize. And right now I'm carrying a lot of anger. And I don't even know how to process that. I don't even know where to put that, right? So I'm trying to come into rooms like this so that I can make sure that I'm around the right people and that we'll take it the right way. And I don't go the wrong direction with it. And I don't let it get rooted because I've done that before and lost 2 years of my life to anger, which I talked about in Rachel's podcast or her Twitter space, The Gift of Anger. But I don't want that gift anymore. I want to give it back. So thank you for letting me share, and I'll let you get back to Graciela. Thanks, Donika. I love you too.
Thank you for sharing that, Kimberly. And anger's tricky. We're going to do an episode on that as well. I didn't have an anger phase after my daughter died for a long time. And I was a little surprised about that, but we didn't know why she died. And I was, however, paralyzed with guilt, paralyzed with guilt, which I learned was anger directed inwards. But when there's no, I couldn't blame the NRA. I couldn't blame a drunk driver. I couldn't blame cancer. I couldn't blame when you don't know what it is. I found that a lot of SUDC parents and SIDS parents struggled with guilt because it went inward. So it took a long time for me to have an anger phase. And then we're all taught different messaging around anger. I'm from the Midwest in a Protestant family. Anger is just bad. And so people bottle up their anger, and then that leads to a lot of other terrible stuff. So anger is a tricky thing. You know, denying it can create problems. As you say, letting it become rooted creates problems as well. So we're going to definitely be doing an episode on anger, and maybe Kimberly, you'd like to help me with that if you're feeling up to it, when you're feeling up to it. And Graciela, I know you had something to say.
Yeah, well, I also wanted to extend my heart out to Kimberly. Thank you so much for sharing. And if I may, I would like to unravel some of the general details that you brought up. So thank you. Because well, now I forget because it was so much and it's so emotional. Oh my goodness. But see, here's the thing. There's that empathy of it, right? And these people, okay, so I wanted to start with the advocacy and how some people just absolutely do not get what we may want to advocate for or about. It's like, and I've experienced it too. It's like you are not supposed to experience postpartum depression if your child is alive and healthy and well. What? Like who is where is this logic coming from, right? And so this complete lack of empathy from the masses or from, just us as a society or culturally. And what I've come to understand, with my work and with my healing journey is if you cannot relate to what I'm going through empathically, then you're not my people. And that's okay. But now I know that you're just not the person or the platform or the group for me to share, right? Because the people who are your people will get it 100%, even if they've never, gone through it themselves. That's the secret sauce about empathy is I get to really mentally put myself in your shoes and just hold space and love you in such a way that you need the love and the healing and the energy. Just sending good vibes, right? Like sometimes that's all it takes because I can't be there to pat her in the back, right? Or to give her a hug, but I can send her my love. And it's like, I will never understand that disconnect of people coming at things with a bark or with a just something so nonsensical. And then I just remind myself that I see it so deeply and I see it so clearly, probably because I'm a highly sensitive person who is sensitive to all sides of the situation and not blinded by just, I don't even know, nonsense, right? So I wanted to point that out because it's so huge to just be there for one another. It really boils down to respect. Like, who are these people who absolutely cannot even hold respect for you in what you're going through, right? They're definitely not your people, right? And if they hadn't proved that, then now they have, right? So this is huge in the grieving process because we want to be able to target the people that will respect, at the very minimum, respect what we are going through. And so this takes me back to when we were in my dad's funeral, and I was blamed for not crying enough. Like, why are you telling me how to grieve? That is so bizarre like you should be focused on your grieving and on how you want to honor this person, my dad or whoever, and let other people figure out their process without judgment. See, that's the tricky thing. Judgment is just comes so easy, and it's a problem. So my heart just is so heavy with love, not just grief in this moment for Kimberly, because it's huge. And I also know that you posted about Taylor Swift's song like a week and a half ago, and I saw that. But I also knew about your previous miscarriages, so I didn't bring it up or anything.
So, you know
Yeah.
what's strange? I didn't know about my miscarriage when I posted that. Like, that was literally 24 hours before like, after I posted that. And I was just putting it up there because I was like, does anyone else feel like the song is about miscarriage? And I had no idea why that was coming through so powerfully, because song lyrics are one of the biggest ways that I connect to my emotions, like you were talking about, I think, Graciela, when I came in. So, yeah, that, I think there's been science done that the heart can feel up to 2 weeks before something happens. And highly sensitive people can really feel those things. And I deleted a couple tweets. I kept reposting that tweet and then like, nah. And I actually ended up deleting it because I was like, I don't think anybody's going to understand this from me. So yeah, I'm glad that you saw that, but I didn't actually know when that happened. It was actually Tuesday of last week when this happened in the middle of the night. And I had to get on a flight to San Francisco like 6 hours later. And it was a very bizarre experience. But anyway, yeah, so it's interesting that you saw that and you didn't know, and I didn't know. So there must have been something, calling to me that resonated with that feeling from the heart perspective long before I actually went through the physical side of it.
Right.
Sorry to
Yeah.
interrupt.
No, you're fine. And you know that I have a Taylor Swift Instagram account, so I'm in
Yes, I did know that. Like,
all
T
of this.
Swifty. Yeah.
And you're not the only one. The song has been very triggering in that regard for miscarriages across the board. So it's so wonderful how she can just relate that message and for people to receive it the way that they have. So again, that's another example of how you're not alone, right? And to understand that just brings a lot of peace, and it just feels good sometimes to know that we're not going through things by ourselves, right? And what Donika said was also huge when she was talking about making a plan, because earlier we were discussing how when we are at our lowest, we don't feel like doing any of it. Absolutely. And we also talked about how sometimes doing the action, even if you don't want to, can lead to that motivation of, okay, I did this, so let me do something else and let me do something else. And then by the end of the day, you marvel at how much you got done, even though you didn't feel like doing any of it to begin with, right? Because you're in that grieving process or energy. So it's been a beautiful conversation, and I'm just very grateful to be able to share it. So thank you all for being here.
Thank you so much, Graciela. Is the song that y'all are talking about the Bigger Than the Sky? So is that the song you're talking about?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's really interesting because my 13-year-old daughter is a big old Swiftie. She's very proud that she was in the top 1% of streamers for the album. It's played a lot here. I'm just saying. But she was staying with her dad for a couple of days and sent me that song and said, Mom, I just wanted to share this with you because it reminded me of Alice, her little sister. And it really got me, and it was really very sweet of her to do that. And yeah, it's hard to imagine it's not about miscarriage, or at least an extremely significant loss of, and it seems like not just any loss. It seems like a loss that's connected to some kind of innocence, like a child or miscarriage or something like that.
If I could
Yes.
add the one little thing, I just put my headphones in. I thought it was quiet this whole time, and then it connected. I'm sorry. The one part that got me in that song that was interesting that I posted and then deleted, and then this experience happened, is the lyric. I won't go into all of it because, of course, trigger for everyone, but it said you were bigger than just a short time. That was the part that really got me. Because when I talk about miscarriage, or I talk about the stillbirth, or I talk about the loss of my sister, people tend to be more caring about the loss of my sister because she had a long life and she had children. But people tend to be very dismissive of the miscarriages or the stillbirth because they're like, well, that wasn't that long ago, that long a time. Like the time means nothing in grief. The connection that we make with people or beings that could be, it still runs through our head. And Melissa, I'm sure you have this as well. And Graciela with your dad is the what could have been. And that's also in that song. It's the should have, could have been, and all of that. It's the what could have been. And those dates that you mentioned earlier, Melissa, it was so healing for me to hear you say that the dates can be very triggering because I run through each one of my miscarriages, ages and names. And so I'm like, I won't name them, but this one would be this old, and I wonder what they would look like. And, those are just re-traumatizing dates, of course, but there's also ways to celebrate that. You reminded me of that today. So I think what I'm going to walk away from is so much gratitude for everybody that shared here, but also some actual tangible things that you left me with, whether I knew them and forgot them or didn't know them. But the celebration of the dates was a really big thing that I pulled from today, which was I don't need the world to celebrate with me. And Graciela, you said, hopefully I know they're not my people. To be clear, these are not friends or family. This is a following of people from the scrapbooking world that when I tend to post things that are of this nature, there's these weird, strange women. It's always women, never men. It's always these women that come in and
Always.
say,
It's
always women,
always.
right?
What
Isn't
is
that
that? And they're
strange?
all mothers, which
They're all
blows
mothers.
my mind. I
Yeah.
don't get it. I do not
And
get
what's
it.
weird is, something I noticed, and I think I would love to have this conversation. I had it scheduled for a while. Maybe anyone wants to co-host with me, let me know. But I really found this to be interesting. I saw a lot of people that attacked me comment on Chrissy Teigen's post last year because when you follow people, you can see the last couple of people that like or comment on someone's post. And so I was watching these people that will attack me and say, well, you're just trying to get attention, or, you shouldn't say anything about this. But they have no problem writing on a complete stranger who's a celebrity and saying, I'm so sorry for your loss. But someone close to them, they don't have the ability to hold space for or have empathy for. I don't know what that phenomenon is. Maybe somebody else is more, educated on that. But I have noticed that in patterns that people in my friend group will judge people and then they will go and praise it with a celebrity. So that was something else that sat very strange with me this week, was seeing these people that I knew had commented on Chrissy Teigen's post to the point it drove me crazy. I went back and checked, and they were the ones that wrote on my stories. I only left my story up for about 2 hours on Instagram and then took it down because of the trolling. So it's just an interesting time that we live in, where people feel the need to give more empathy to celebrities that will never know their name than the people that are in their communities. So I just wanted to speak on that too.
Oh, I have a lot to say about that, but that's a whole nother show. Yeah, just I can't even really get started on that because it's so that's a deep mine. I'm so sorry that happened to you. I want to go to war for you right now, Kimberly. Like I feel like, all right, this grieving mom is on a different side of this now, and I'm gonna go out there. But it doesn't really we can't change them. We can only find our people and surround ourselves with our people. And but I do think that it does help to have a place to go where it will be received well, a place to go where you can say, this happened to me and it really felt bad. And has it happened to anyone else? And oh my God, what? I mean, sometimes just that's enough to help you get through something. Like, that's such a weird thing. Like, why would people do that? It makes no sense. No sense that you would take time out of your day and your own precious life to judge someone else's response to loss, and that it comes from people, in my book that's coming up soon, I write a whole thing about this phenomenon, actually. Like, I have seen you go on 40 thread rants about bad service at a restaurant, but you're going to judge me for crying when my 2-year-old dies for no reason? I mean, really? Really? Okay. I mean, I'm gonna be over here though. I'm not gonna hang out with you right now, maybe in the future, but that is not the energy I need around me. Or, I'm sorry, did I listen to you cry about your boyfriend that treated you like crap for 5 years, and you're gonna judge me about being in shock over the loss of my healthy child? I mean, really, that's what you want to do? Okay. I mean, it's really disappointing to learn how people are sometime, but we got to just keep marching toward the love. I'm so sorry that was your experience. And in those moments that your act, bringing it back to our topic, sometimes your best act of self-care and self-love is saying, I don't really need to do anything about that person. I just need to unplug. And I find that when we unplug from something that's deeply hurtful like that and remain open, something comes along. And like Kimberly said, she just happened into this space. I know that I know that Kimberly's never been in this space. So I was happy to see her here. I've enjoyed her spaces, and I thought she was probably just mainly coming to support Graciela or myself, and which is fine. I want non-grievers and people who haven't lost children to take place in these spaces, because we're so grief illiterate. We don't know what to do for ourselves or others in times of grief. But when we unplug from what feels like poison, and we are already in that openness of grief, almost every time something beautiful will come fill it. And if I can ever do that for anyone, then I will be doing my daughter's memory justice, which is the whole reason I do this. Graciela, do you have anything else, any final words? We've gone so much longer than I normally do, and I appreciate your time so much.
No, absolutely. Well, I wanted to say thank you so much for allowing me to share. When Melissa reached out, I felt a bit inadequate because I have never lost a child. And so I was like, I'm not sure I'm the right person to share in this space. And it felt so good, honestly, for you to tell me that I could still talk about grief in general, which of course definitely can do that. And that I could talk about self-care and self-love and just the things that I coach through. So I want to thank you for allowing me the space to share with all of you, because this is just very, it touches everyone, whether we admit it or not, right? Like, we all know someone who has lost a child, whether it's later on in life or early on, right? And so that there's that empath aspect of, I want to be in these conversations as well. So thank you for allowing me to do so. And the love and the support felt in your spaces is very needed. So I wanted to commend you for the work that you do, because these are the types of conversations that really make a difference. And it's sad that it's not the type of conversations that get noticed the most, right? But it's like, in my, what's the word, mental health space that I host every Wednesday, this member of our community who is a man was talking about postpartum depression and the backlash that he gets for being a man who advocates for his wife who went through it. And I'm like, yeah, I will never understand that. Right? Like, if your wife is going through postpartum depression and you want to advocate for it and speak about it, you're more than welcome to. I don't understand why there's opposition in all things. I do believe that, right? And so it's almost like you need to do it and then expect that opposition and walk right through it and march along, right? And just keep doing it. So I want to commend Kimberly as well for speaking up and for sharing, because that's definitely part of that healing journey. And I'm very grateful that you stumbled upon the space today and that you felt compelled to share, because it just touches everyone. And I'm very glad that you felt like you trusted us enough to share. So thank you.
Exactly. I'm very grateful to Mr. JB, Kimberly, Doniga, everyone that shared today. Thank you so much. It makes a difference. And I get so many notes privately each week from people saying, this person who shared story really touched me because, that's how I felt. And I felt different than other bereaved parents or bereaved people because I had this experience. And so it was so helpful to hear them share that was their experience or they had a similar experience. So just know that by sharing, I'm sure it's helpful. It's helpful for us personally to share, but I want everyone that's sharing to know that you are touching the lives of a lot of people who you will never know, who I will never know, but who occasionally reach out to me and say this I found this accidentally. And because you're right, chats like child loss chat's never going to be at the top of the algorithm. I'm well aware of that. But the people who kind of stumble across it accidentally and send me notes, I just want you to know that the stories you share and what you bring to this space is really helping people in a way that we all need help with. Death is the only thing that's going to happen to us all. I mean, they often say death and taxes, but there hasn't always been taxes. If you live longer than, Kimberly's children and my daughter did, we are all going to experience grief, all of us. And our society leaves us so ill-equipped to deal with it. And there's so much judgment. Graciela, what you were just saying, that makes me so angry. But there's so much gatekeeping of other people's emotional experience right now. And it is really not okay. And I can't spend my life in anger, although I really do want to go to I feel like Wonder Woman right now when I hear these two stories. Like, I'm getting on my armor and I'm going to the front lines because that shit will not fly. I will not have it on my watch. But that's probably not the best use of my time. So what we can do is talk openly about it, because I think sometimes these folks don't really realize it. And some of these people think they're being helpful. They really do. They really think they're being helpful. It blows my mind that they would ever think it's helpful, but they do. And talking to somebody directly about this is usually not successful, because it's very difficult to do it in a way that leaves them not feeling shamed, or leaves them in a way feeling like they shouldn't even try to be there. So doing shows like this where they might come across it and hear the information indirectly is how a lot of people learn life lessons. It's how we all learn life lessons, if we're honest with ourselves. I mean, sometimes you're like, oh God, I've done that. I didn't realize it wasn't helpful. But these things we talked about today, it seems very difficult to believe that you wouldn't know it was not helpful. And Kimberly, yeah, maybe we can talk sometime about the celebrity thing, because I have a lot to say about that. It is a very bizarre phenomena that happens, and deeply hurtful. Anyway, I will wrap it up now. We're already 35 minutes over what we normally do. Graciela, I appreciate your time so much. Dr. A, I appreciate you. You get a raise after today. I didn't realize we went so long. Thank you, everyone, for sharing. Thank you for opening your hearts, everyone that shared, and everyone that listened, and everyone that will be listening in the future. I appreciate you, and just keep marching toward the love. Keep surrounding yourself with things that feel good, and know that your tools might not always look the way that you think they will. Your support might not always be who or what you think it is. And grief leaves us you're an open wound, and that is really difficult. But allow that openness to work for you by being open to support and acts of self-care that you might not have considered before.
Thank you.
Thank you, Graciela.
Thank you.
Appreciate you. Thank you all so much. I hope you have a beautiful day. And my DMs are always open. Thank you for joining us today. For more information on the show or my other work, you can check out thisclubsucks.com or melissamariemonroe.com, or you can find me on Twitter at MMeaning. May you experience some gentleness on your path today.